Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Ted, your coach of the Pummeling Licky Lickies, and I'm back once again for another video. Today, I'm doing some power rankings with my good friend Squirly. Say hello.
Okay.
And we're going to be reviewing the power rankings for the doubles division in the PBF. This is just going our personal review on each team. So we're going starting at number 18 all the way down to number 1. And yeah, let's begin real quick right here. And let's start off with the Utah Muse.
So this is the bottom team, but they've still got some good tools. The reason we placed them bottom, there's not enough synergy on the team. There's lots of you've got some strong offensive pressure with Mega Alakazam, but there's not a whole lot going synergy wise with the team.
Yeah, yeah, obviously there's a lot of weaknesses as you guys can tell. There's 3 poison types on this team, which is not entirely good. Not many ground resists as well, only being Celesteela and Sceptile. And even with Sceptile, like its defenses are pretty bad, so that ground weakness is very huge for this team. Something I would probably recommend to the coach would probably be during a trading period would possibly get like another ground resist, maybe even another flying type potentially, other than Celesteela to mitigate that ground weakness. But yeah, I think overall the team can obviously perform well even though they're at the bottom of the ranks. But yeah, that's just my general overview of the team. Anything else?
I think another weakness is, well, I think there are some other teams that also have the same thing, but there aren't any ghost resists. And when your mega is weak to ghost, it's such an important Pokemon on your team. To not have a single switch in for it is not great.
Yeah. So yeah, overall the ranking is 18th, and their tier in terms of the tiers from A to D, obviously they're D tier. So next up are the Invincibles, coached by Sleemo24. General thoughts on this team. I think their cores are generally good. Obviously, like the Talbafini and the Ferrothorn are obviously good defensive cores. I'm able to take a lot of hits, personally on the physical and special side of things. They do have some good offensive pressure with Gyarados, Gengar, and the Urshifu single strike. But yeah, other than that, they have a good, well-rounded team, as much better than the previous team. But there are a few potential weaknesses that I can see with this team.
Yeah, I think the biggest weakness is it's got to be the 3 water types, especially with. I can't see Wailord doing much when Finny and Gyarados are also on the team. Like, they're just the superior water types. Also, your only form of speed control is Cottony, which I think Cottony Tailwind, it's obviously it's a great mon, but you can find ways around it quite easily.
Yeah, it also gets Cotton Spore with the Nectex format.
Yes.
So those are 2 ways for speed control, but other than that, there's not really too much.
Yeah, and in terms of support, you've essentially got Fake Out and Magmortar, which gets Follow Me because of Natdex.
Yeah, even Magmortar with Follow Me is pretty. I mean, in terms of like the defensive sides of things,
it's not something you want to use. Yeah, it's not something you want to use for redirection, but because it won't take hits, but it's there as an option.
Yeah, you most likely want to use it as like a glass cannon for those fire type moves.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, their overall ranking is 17th. We feel like it's much better than the 18th team. And again, their tier is D tier. That's pretty much it for this team. Next up, we have the Jackson 5, coached by Poor2D.
Okay, so this team, it's got a lot of good offensive pressure. You've got very strong Trick Room mode in Gorgeist, Conkelder, Copperaja. You've got Landorus Aerodactyl for your fast options, which can do a lot of damage very quickly. There's some flaws with the team though, for sure. Hence why it's down here. For example, Unknown.
Yeah, even though Unknown is pretty much useless, I guess we can make like an honorable mention since it does get hidden power, even though it's pretty much useless. But this team has a pretty strong Trick Room mode with the Comfey, Copperaja, and the Conkelder, along with the Gorgeist as well. I think those were pretty good under Trick Room. Even though Comfey is fast with its base 100 speed, it can still be a good support mon under the Trick Room. Probably proccing those weakness policies off of Conkelder for the +2 in attack boost. Another chorus with obviously with the Bouffalant, with Sap Sipper, with Giga Drain, some previous obvious cores.
Poliwrath can also hold the weakness policy with Comfey.
Yeah. And obviously they have a small little ring core with the Volbeat and the Poliwrath, since it gets access to Rain Dance, priority Rain Dance, so it can be pretty fast after immediately during turn 1. So those are some good things. I guess like overall, even though the team has pretty much a good amount of synergies, there are plethora of weaknesses around the board, but nothing too crazy. So they're at tier D+, and they're ranked 16th. You have anything else to say? No? Alright, well, I guess we can just move on to the next team, the Fine Crumbs. They're ranked number 15th, and their tier is D+. This team is fairly interesting. They have a good psychic terrain team, I guess, with the Tapu Lele and the Mega Latios.
Okay, sorry, just technical issue.
Okay.
This.
It's alright. I just continue on to the next team. Yeah, those two high offensive pressures is definitely good for this team. Being this team being pretty frail. Sorry. They do have the Volcarona for redirection, but at the same time they also have the Tangrowth, so a little bit redundant, I guess, in redirection, but there's nothing too bad about that. Ditto is a little bit of a wild card for this team, being it can transform to anything on the opposing side of where it's standing, so this coach has to play around with that. And being since this form has Knack Dex, the Volcarona does get Tailwind. I did check for that, so he has 2 Tailwind users with the Braviary and the Volcarona. But yeah, other than that,
Latios, I believe.
Yeah, Latios as well. So 3 Tailwind users. But yeah, other than that, there's nothing really much too special with the team. Thievul obviously can do some Thievul things, so it's better to keep an eye out for that Pokemon. Yeah. Anything else from your side, Squirly?
I don't have too much to say about this team. I think you've covered most of it. I do want to say that Galarian Weezing is for a team that does. There are some abilities that it does rely on. I'm not too sure on the Weezing pick. You need a poison type, but I don't know why that's there, to be honest.
Yeah, that's pretty understandable. Yeah, Wheezing can also be Levitate and Misty Surge, but the main
Misty
ability,
Surge
yeah,
is
it kind of interferes with the Psychic Drain, but it can be usable. And Levitate, obviously, to stop the ground weakness from Wheezing. But again, he already has a flying type, and he has Levitate already as well. So, um, yeah, probably to make the team better, probably trade away the Wheezing for something else. But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid team. But it is ranked pretty low at D plus and ranked number 15th. Yeah. So on to the next team, the Submarine Scissors, coached by Night Owl. A pretty interesting team, revolving around that Hail core with the Ninetales and the Arctozolt. Obviously, Hail is pretty strong. If you have even though there are not many good like Hail abusers, I think Arctozolt does a good amount of damage with the Bolt Beak and an Icicle Crash under Hail. One thing to note would be having 3 screens users, which is kind of alarming since Ninetales would probably be your best screens user since it gets Aurora Veil. The Meowstick and the Regieleki are kind of redundant, but I guess I can't see their uses because Prankster is always good, and Regieleki is good for speed control. Blastoise.
Yeah, however,
Go ahead.
however, the thing is for that, Ninetales, it's also very fast, which will outspeed most things in draft format, and it can Icy Wind. So it's pretty, screens Icy Wind, it's pretty similar to Regieleki in terms of support.
Yeah, but I think overall, like, the Blastoise is obviously good for bulky Follow Me, and again, it gets a good amount of speed control options. Obviously, the Trigger mode is also good as well, with the Runerigus and the Snorlax. Typhlosion is kind of the outlier, since the Hisuian form loses a little bit of speed, but is not entirely good in Trick Room. It is pretty frail, even though it's which is common in most Ghost type Pokemon.
Yeah. And that Ghost type does hinder him, to be honest. He has a lot of Ghost weaknesses. He has a lot of Dark weaknesses with no real way to counter.
Yeah.
So that could be a real issue for this team, just type matchups and not having switch. He doesn't have switch-ins to attacks, basically. If his opponent can get up the offensive pressure, there's not going to be any real way for him to respond.
Yeah, this team is also pretty much Blizzard weak as well, since Ninetales Alola sets up the Hail for you, and you can just obviously spam Blizzard the Garchomp whenever it's on the field. And the same for pretty much all the mons here, being Snorlax, having thick fat and resistant to ice moves. So yeah, that's your only resistant to ice. Everything else takes neutral damage.
Because other than your mini like Hail Core with Ninetales, Arctozolt, Hail does hinder your own team quite a bit. There's Pokemon that will want to be able to hold Sash, but won't be able to because of Hail.
Yeah.
And obviously Blizzard, as you said, is going to be a real problem for this team.
So yeah, even though those weaknesses are pretty obvious, we rank them at number 14th, and their tier is C-. So moving on, we have the Atletico de Mauel, coached by Tom Elvis. I think I like this team, honestly, being the team is very unique. To point out a few offensive pressures would be the Lando and the Heatran being his main offensive pressures, but the Suicune and the Enamorous Therian are also good offensive pressures as well. Suicune providing Tailwind and a few other speed control options is very good for this team. Enamorous, even though its base speed is 46, I think it's pretty good under both scenarios in Trick Room and Tailwind, if you can play it right. Now, obviously, the Mega
Yeah.
Sableye is a little concerning. I would probably like to see a better Mega on this team, but I don't have a problem with it since it's pretty good.
Sableye is probably the biggest weakness in this team. Also, another thing with, you said Enamours can be used Tailwind or Trick Room. So your Tailwind setter also gets Icy Wind, so that Tailwind plus Icy Winds, you can actually just go Turbo and Enamours and outspeed everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
You've got 4 Fake Out, I believe, in Kecleon, Sableye, Mienshao.
I think it's just those 3.
Just those 3.
Yeah.
Just those 3. So, while your Trick Room setter is frail, you do have Fake Out support, even though you have no redirection, which could be a bit of an issue with trying to reliably set up Trick Room, but...
Yeah, and Exercutry being his Z-move user, which does a lot of damage, it does get access to Tail Glow in this Nathex format, so being able to set up a Tail Glow and do massive amount of damage with Dazzling Gleam or even a Thunderbolt will do a lot for this team.
For sure.
So Viper, a little bit interesting pick by Tom. He did tell us about the move sets it can run and the different moves and coverage it can have. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it does. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, should we head on to the next team?
You want to add anything else, or that's all for you?
No, I mean this team does have a really solid type chart. Like you don't have any major type weaknesses, to be honest. But yeah, that's about all I have to say.
All right, moving on to the next team. We have the Aussie Arcanites, coached by Vikak. So it's one of those other mid teams you're not quite sure about. But the offensive presence is there. Obviously, the Tapu Koko and the Greninja are more the obvious ones, alongside Mega Charizard and that Mamoswine. They also have a good amount of support. They have 2 Trick Room users, but both are pretty frail, minus the Dusknoir, since it's a pretty bulky ghost type. Obviously, the Illumise with Prankster Tailwind is obviously pretty good for this team as well. The Suncore, it's a little bit shaky for me since the Lilligant Hisui doesn't get a good amount of physical coverage. So I'll be quite interested to see how well he uses that mode. And yeah, he also has the bulky water type with Follow Me in War Turtle. Anything else to add, Squirly?
Yeah, War Turtle, as you said, I think it was a great value because you can go with so many different support options with it. Charizard, obviously, in the sun can do a huge amount of damage, but it's still just Charizard. Vocal, obviously, Trick Room is kind of terrifying. Yeah, as you said, Lilligant Hisui. Looking at the move pool, it gets pretty much only special moves, with only a couple physical moves, and its special attack is pretty abysmal. I will point out the ground weakness, with your only resistances being Illumise and Lilligant, both of which are very frail Pokemon. So I think that could be an issue.
Yeah.
But it's a solid team. It's got a lot of offensive pressure.
Yeah.
It can deal a huge amount of damage very quickly. That's about all I have to say, to be honest.
Yeah, there's nothing really much to be said about this team. I think it's, like I mentioned before in the previous team, I think it's one of those other mid-tier teams that could potentially surprise us in the regular season. But yeah, nothing else being said. Let's move on to the next team, which are the Agate Village Appletons, coached by Rissy. Again, it's just one of those mid-tier teams. Obviously, the Mega King and the Arcanine are probably the biggest threats to this team, but Milotic is also a good presence on the field since it's one of those bulky water types that you don't really want to face. Having competitive scares away those Intimidate users and the Starls away from your team. The Trick Room mode is pretty good as well. Hariyama is probably one of those mons you don't really see much in Trick Room, or ones being used too often, but it can run in Trick Room. Having Guts and Flame Orb is really good with Facade and a good amount of coverage as well on it. Obviously Mimikyu being your main Trick Room user, having the Disguise ability, potentially taking one hit and then set up Trick Room is really good. They have two Tailwind users as well, with the Murkrow and the Sigilith, but Prankster Murkrow is obviously way better with the Eviolite, potentially taking a few Thunderbolts and maybe even a few rock slides as well.
No, looking at his stats, I think you would have to go Sash. He's got 42 right. defenses.
Alright, well, either way, with Eviolite or Focus Sash, I think those are two good items on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Mudsdale, also another one that can be used in Trick Room, but it gets Stamina and paired up with Beat Up, raising those defense stats are really good for it. The only outlier to this team would probably be the Maractus, but it does protect you against those Water-type moves that the Arcanine and the Mudsdale don't want to take. But yeah, other than that, I think this team is just one of those other mid-tier teams.
Yeah, like it's a solid team. There's no major weaknesses. There's no incredible picks either. I think you've covered most of it, to be honest. I mean, the type chart's pretty decent. Fairy could be a bit of a problem. Your Steel type, obviously being Dragon with a very low special defense. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Alright, so again, their rank is 11th, and we place them at the C+ tier. Next up, we have the Stark Sharks, coached by Neku. You can take the reins on this one, Squirly.
Alright, so it's obviously the first impressions when you see this team. It's Rain, you've got Politoed, Zapdos, Kartana. It's very threatening offensive pressure. You've also got Zoroark with a Z Crystal. So, and obviously with the Ghost typing, you can't just scout for it with Fake Out or anything. So that could be pretty dangerous. This team could have been a lot better. I think the reason we placed it this low was the Ghost weakness. With Ghost and Dark specifically. With Zoroark, Drifblim, Shedinja, Azelf, all being weak to that. Overall, it's a solid team. You've got a lot of offense. Anything you want to add?
No, not really. I think the offensive pressure, like you said, is there. But the double Ghost type is a little bit concerning. So yeah, that's the only thing I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just type matchups. Just type matchups. That's the main problem.
All right. So next up, we have the band Incineroars, coached by 200 Candies. They're ranked 9th, and their tier is B-.
Okay, so like the first thing I noticed about this team was you got Incineroar Thwaggy, which is it's basically pseudo Incineroar, which was meta defining in Series 10. So in a draft league, that's going to be terrifying. You've also got Mega Salamence, that's Intimidate plus just insane damage output. You've got Cresselia, Clefable, great support mons. Kommo, Magnezone are the great offensive tools. The three other picks, I think that's what let this team down. The last three picks in Cryogonaut, Guzzlord, and Kingler. Especially Guzzlord, due to this team's pretty big fairy weakness. You do have Magnezone for the resist, however, like a lot of your top mons just really don't want to take like Salamence, Kommo. What do you do to fairy types?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the quad fairy weaknesses to Komodo and the Guzzlord is a little bit concerning. And like you mentioned before, the Magnezone being only the resist fairy is probably not great. But I think overall the team is good. I think it can work out pretty well, and we'll just have to see how the team plays out in the regular season.
Yeah.
Alright, so next up we have the Etro Designers, coached by Pika. Their ranking is 8th, and we place them in the B- tier.
So this team, it's got that Sun mode it's incredibly strong with Charizard, Venusaur. Obviously, Venusaur's going to be going first. It could throw off attacks. It could click Sleep Powder. Mega Charizard's almost guaranteed Sun, as when it Mega Evolves, it will set up the Sun. You can't switch in a different Weathermon to get rid of Sun. You have at least one guaranteed turn of Sun, basically. You've got Fungus, Redirection, Crobat, Tailwind support. Klefki, you've got Screens, so lots of great support. Umbreon, Registeel, really good bulk. I think a couple main concerns we had about this team was it's a Sun team with a pretty big weakness to fire, with Venusaur, Fungus, Registeel, and Klefki all being fire weak. And the other thing was the Regidrago pick that we think could have been substituted for something a little better on this team.
Yeah, I think like if his opponent had like a good fire type on their team, and being able to take advantage of the Sun, would probably hit really hard into the Registeel and Klefki. But they do have screens with the Klefki, so it can mitigate the damage a little bit, but not too much. Obviously, they do have a Tailwind user with the Crobat having Inner Focus, being not can't be faked out, so that's another good thing. But yeah, other than the fire weakness, I think overall the team is pretty good, and the ranking shows as well that the team is fairly well balanced. Alright, so next up we have the New York Nui Egos, coached by Toxin Alpaca. This team, as you guys can see on the screen, is pretty fast, with the Mega Gengar and the Weavile being those main attackers on the team. Obviously, the Gastrodon, again, one of those staples on teams, having a bulky water type is obviously very good. Storm Drain to protect you from water attacks, but this team is fine against water, which I guess is okay, but I think it's a good pick. Obviously, Superior, having Contrary with Leaf Storm is obviously a no-brainer. Their Trick Room mode is not quite apparent, even though the Double and the Aromatisse are okay. The bulk is there.
Double is actually base 88 speed,
okay.
so I think your main Trick Room mode would be with Gastrodon. Potentially Center Scorch with 65, however that's a bit fast.
Yeah. So yeah, the Trick Room mode is pretty much non-existent, but it's there if they want to use it. And then the rest of the team is pretty okay. Luxray, obviously, with Intimidate. Cobalion paired up with the Weavile for Beat Up is an obvious strat. Noivern and the Centiskorch have their niches, so I think overall the team is pretty well rounded, and the tier shows why they're placed so high. So anything else from you, Squirly?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. Well, this hasn't got anything special. I mean, you've got Mega Gengar, which is an incredibly powerful Pokemon. I think the best thing about this team is it's just really well rounded. There's no major weaknesses, unlike I think most of the other teams we've gone through so far. So yeah, should we move on to the next team?
Yeah. All right. So next up we have the Shutty Storage City Sabins, coached by Tyndall64. Obviously, you guys can see it's a huge rain team with that Mega Metagross and the Pelipper and Ludicolo. Obviously, Metagross loves the rain. It doesn't want to take a fire hit in the sun. And the Raikou is a good support in rain as well, with hitting those 100% accurate thunders. But the main rain card would be the Ludicolo and the Pelipper. Having a base 70 speed in rain is obviously pretty good. Having Life Orb with Giga Drain, Energy Ball, Weather Ball, Scald, Hydro Pump, just to name a few moves. Hits pretty hard in the rain. Gudra Hisui also likes to be in the rain. But what's its speed again? I'm not quite sure.
Hisui and Gudra base 60.
Okay, so yeah, it's not fast, but it can be good under Tailwind, which Pelipper gets. So that's something to consider here. Obviously, Tyndall has two Follow Me users with the Indeedee Female and the Pachirisu, so we can expect Follow Me on one of them, whenever Riki decides to bring them. And the Trick Room mode is probably not that too apparent.
No, other than Cofagrigus, his lowest Pokemon is base 60.
Yeah, so the Trick Room mode is a little lacking. So I probably like to see another trade for a much slower Mon on this team. Now he did say he did get sniped by 2D, which we previously covered from the Conkeldurr. So maybe we'll see him do another trade later down the line for a slower Mon. But yeah, I think overall the team is well-rounded for a rain team. And yeah, nothing else from me. Anything else from you, Squirly?
I think I will add Indeedee Psychic Terrain will power up Metagross's Zen Headbutts. And basically the only weakness we could spot in this team was Earthquake Spam, as that bypasses your redirection and hits 4 for super effective, but that's not a huge issue. There's not much else to say about this. It's a solid team. It's a really good team, hence why it's ranked so high.
Yeah, and the tier is B tier, obviously. Alright, next up is my team, the Pommy Licky Lickies. So Squirrely, you can take over from here.
I'll go over this team. So you've got, firstly the Mega, you've got Swampert, and you have Riolu, which can ranks to Rain Dance. Swampert, it's something I've used before. It can deal huge amounts of damage with its rain boosted waterfalls. You've got an Amorous. While it doesn't get superpower to take advantage of that contrary, it is still a very powerful special attacker. It's very fast, very high power. I believe it has a Z move as well.
Yeah. So
I'll definitely expect taking advantage of that. Metagross is a solid pick. Same with Tyndall's team. It really likes the rain that's present on this team. You've got Articuno, which, as well as an Amorous, can both be used as kind of anti-intimidate / snarl Pokemon. Torracat's a great value. Fake Out, intimidate support. Drapion was really good value as well. Something I had my eyes on personally. And Gudra, obviously very bulky. Pretty powerful. Rotom's just such a versatile Pokemon as well. Is there anything I've missed? Obviously, you know your team better than I do.
Yeah, I don't think you mentioned the Ambipom, but again,
Yeah,
it does similar things to the Torracat, but it does get other support options as well.
it's really fast. You got Fake Out.
Yeah.
I'm sure it gets other support options, which I imagine we will see later on. And just looking at the type chart now, everything looks pretty solid. Only thing like Freeze Dry maybe, but other than that, it's got no weaknesses in terms of type matchups.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a solid team, solid top 5.
So yeah, we ranked my team B plus, and like Squirly said, I'm ranked number 5th. Next up, we have the Oakland Artilleries. They're at 4th place, and their tier is B plus, coached by Yaya Ball. It's another weather team with the Mega Tyranitar and the Stoutland. Obviously, that sand core is pretty obvious. But Creatively can also take advantage of that, getting a special defense boost since the rock type is. I think it's really good in terms of bulk for this team. I think like overall it's a pretty well-rounded team. I think the only outlier will potentially be the Urshifu, being a water type and a fighting type. I guess it covers the type chart pretty well, but I think being a water and fighting type is kind of a little concerning, but it does bring another offensive pressure to the team. Obviously, the Salamence with Intimidate support is good as well. I think Hitmontop and Scissor bring those technician stuff with Bullet Punch and Sucker Punch as well. And Rotom being a Rotom form gets a good amount of support and good special attacks. Yeah, I think overall it's a pretty well-rounded team, and I think it deserves the 4th ranking on this power ranking video. Anything else from you, Squirly? All right, probably have some technical issues, so move on to Squirly Scene. The Cambridge Chemrups. His team is ranked 3rd, and his tier is A-, obviously coached by Squirly. My thoughts on this team: I think it's a really strong Trick Room team with the Mega Camrup, Glacier, and the Bronzong. Those 3 alone are probably the strongest Trick Room team I've seen so far in this power ranking. Obviously, at this point of time of recording of the video, we know the matchups for week 1, and he is my round 1 opponent, so I'm very scared of this team. But I think overall, the ranking definitely shows why this team is really strong. I think the Togekiss and the Gyarados is a really strong core. Being able to set up the Dragon Dances and Follow Me is really good for this team.
Yeah, Raichu is also a secondary Follow Me user in their decks.
Yeah. I think the Crocodile for Intimidate support is really good. However, there's a lot of, specifically in this draft, there are a lot of competitive and Defiant Pokemon, so I would probably recommend keeping an eye out for that. But I think overall Crocodile is a good Intimidate support mon. Tapu Bulu obviously was in C tier in this draft, but I think having grassy terrain is obviously really good for this team. Obviously, you don't have many ground weaknesses, but I think the Tapu Bulu is good for like those water types that you want to stay away from, especially from the Mega Caramrupt, Crocodile, just name a few, with the Horn Leech and Superpower are good moves on the Tapu Bulu. And Toxtricity, I think, is good, potentially to pair up with the Raichu. You would have to manually set up Electric Terrain, but I think those 2 combos are pretty good. Yeah, Other than the ground weakness that I can see, there's not really too many weaknesses on this team, so that's why it's ranked pretty high and is in the A- tier. Do you have anything else to say about your team?
There's nothing. I don't want to give anything away, as I think a lot of my team is built around things that may not be super obvious at first glance. So should we move on to the next team?
Next up, we have Hyperstorm, coached by Chris. They're second in the power ranking, and their tier is A. You can go ahead, Squirly.
All right. So this team is a terrifying Trick Room team, because if Trick Room goes up, which is very difficult to prevent on this team, as you have Amoonguss Redirection, you have 4, including Smiggle, fake out users. And then you've got, once Trick Room goes up, you've got Mega Morwell, which can do absurd amounts of damage. You've got Guts Saluna, which is also really, really powerful Pokemon. You have Amoonguss, which can just spore at will, unless you have counterplay to that. You've also, even if you choose not to go down the Trick Room route, you got Sableye, Quash, all of that. Obviously, an incredible support move pool, especially paired with Prankster. You got Scrafty, Intimidate. Jinx is another option for sleep. And Smiggle. Smiggle is terrifying in prep because you do not know what it's going to do, because it does something different every game. You never know what it's going to bring. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, obviously, like you mentioned before, this team is a hard Trick Room team. They do have like an okay fast mode with the Lycanroc and the Scrafty. But other than that, it's a pretty hard Trick Room team. But this Trick Room team is very well balanced. Obviously, you can't stop the Trick Room from getting up because he has like 3 main Trick Room users. So yeah, it's gonna be very hard to stop.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, other than that, I think it like we mentioned before, it's a very well balanced team, and it's is the main reason why it's ranked second. And next up, we have the number 1 ranked team. So no surprise at all. We have Gummy 2020, coach of the Will Smiths. And they're ranked first, and they're in the A+ tier. You can go ahead, Gummy, or you can go ahead, Squirly.
All right, this team, it's just a really, really great team. There is not one pick that I would say is bad. Everything does huge amounts for this team. You got Rillaboom, Mega Blastoise, which is a great pick. Cinderace, which is really, really strong Fire Water Grass. Rillaboom, terrifying. Cinderace can be a pretty difficult to prep with due to Libero. You've got Granbull and Overquill, both for Intimidate. They're both great mons. Hydreigon can just nuke stuff, to be honest. It is weak to Fairy, however, you've got counters for that for sure. Zapdos Defiant, so I mean, you're essentially protecting your really powerful physical offensive mons like Cinderace, Rillaboom from Intimidate. Berserker is honestly a really great value steel type. I believe it was C tier. Don't quote me on that. Nidoking can do huge damage with Sheer Force. You don't really want anything taking like an Earth Power. Even if it is resisted, it will still deal a good chunk with Life Orb Sheer Force. Do you want to add?
Yeah. just one thing to mention. By drafting Rillaboom, it takes away that main threat that Blastoise doesn't want to face against. So having Rillaboom on your team takes away a main threat to the Blastoise. So yeah, I think the team is very well rounded, like you mentioned. Not too many weaknesses, which is obviously really good, and has a good amount of support. So yeah, I think those reasons alone make it the first ranked team in power rankings.
Yeah.
Again, guys, don't take this video as with a grain of salt because we don't know. Well, we know most of the coaches in the draft, but we don't know all of them since there are a couple of newcomers. So we don't know their skill sets. So this is just based on what we think of every team. So yeah, like I said before, take this video with a grain of salt and have fun in the season. Any final thoughts, Squirly?
Final thoughts on this team. I mean, I think the only thing that's close to a weakness for this team is ground. However, you've got redirection with Blastoise. You can't get around redirection with Earthquake due to grassy terrain. I'm just trying to look for weaknesses in this team, and I can't find anything, to be honest. I mean, this team's everything's just so strong. Every single Pokemon on this team has a base attack of 100 or above, which is like the raw base stats as well as just general typings and synergy on this team is just incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, before we end it off, are there any final words to all the coaches, Squirly, before we end the video?
Okay. I will say, I don't think we mentioned this earlier. This is purely based on teams. We have not taken coach skill into account. And obviously, we can't get everything correct. There may be a couple inconsistencies. However, we spent quite a while on this tier list, so yeah. I'm hoping that it is as accurate as it can be. I will say, good luck, have fun to everyone playing. I'm sure it'll be a great season.
Yeah. Now again, another mention at the time of the recording. 2 battles have already occurred, so this video won't take account into those battles. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
All of these tiers were decided before the battles happened.
Yeah. All right. So with that being said, until next time, VDL Nation and PBF members, peace.